succeed in Africa. Thank you.
Wonderful rallying cry. Now, the Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations. I don't think we've ever had, in fact, I know we've never had such a thing in the history of Nigeria. We've had trade negotiators, but we've never put such a commitment, a solid kind of vehicle like that together before, which is quite exciting. At the helm of that vehicle, hands on the steering wheel, is Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe. As they say in America, this is not your first rodeo. You have been in the trade milieu for decades, effectively. I doubt there's anybody in Nigeria that knows more about global trade, international trade, and African trade than you. Now, since that, those 44 signatures were put down on paper in Kigali in March, of which, of course, Nigeria's signature wasn't on it, yes? You've been busy. Can you summarize what you've done, what the main results of what the NOTN has done, and especially when it comes to a study that you've done, an independent participatory study that you did on the benefits of the AFCFTA in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for your leadership as well. I know what you have done at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, at the session that you moderated, where I made a presentation at the NSC on this also. Secondly, I like the metaphor. I like the metaphor of the rodeo that you used, because I tell you, perhaps the most appropriate metaphor for the AFCFTA ratification and implementation process, and I didn't think of it, it's Mark who just mentioned it now, is the rodeo. And I've been on this bucking horse, and believe me, it's a stallion. And I have been thrown a number of times, but the challenge and, you know, the how you get this done is when this horse throws you, and I've been thrown about 3 times, you pick yourself up and you get back onto the rump of that horse. So what have we done is what Mark has asked. Number one, remember that the AFCFTA, think about it. It's about 2 things, really, 2 major stakeholders. It's about the rule of law. It's about the rule of law. It's about economic governance on one hand, and on the other hand, it's about getting the private sector, those who would drive it. And you heard them on Mark's panel this morning. So what have we done apropos these 2 major stakeholders? On the rule of law, I had to go to the Nigerian Bar Association, and I went to the Nigerian Institute for Legal Services. Did I get that right? No, it's called NIALS, Nigerian Advanced Legal Institute. It's part of our Supreme Court. And I said to them, I need help. And they said, what help? The first is, and this goes to the heart of the question, I need legal capacity building. So they're providing it. You have the chairman of the SBL here, and you have Irene, the legal counsel, who's also been a legal practitioner, but is now head of the legal counsel at the NSC. And they are giving help. They provided me a platform, and I spoke to the lawyers. Major exercise, and we have the lawyers on our side. If you don't get this right as the rule of law, it's never going to work. So they're helping with legal capacity building. They will help with the update of Nigeria's legal raft of laws. Did you know that some active Nigerian laws today from the 60s prohibit the export of yams and tubers? They're still on the books. They are still on the books. So first thing you have to do is you update your raft of laws. You enact the bills you need to, and you do them expresso. Second thing you have to do with regard to the law, you have to build capacity, because that's a major issue of concern. It's a major issue of concern for the stakeholders. You build a capacity, because it's part of the 21st century economy, a mechanism for rules-based safeguards. If you don't do this, let me tell you what would happen. You would have all your MDAs in all your countries waking up and slapping all sorts of other duties and charges, and the things that Alhaji Dangote talked about, 10 charges there, 10 tolls there, that multiple and proliferating taxation would happen unless you have a discipline within a framework of a rules-based remedy mechanism. And then we move to the stakeholders, and those in the private sector. You have to take care of your industry, your manufacturing. Do you know what we've done? Though we've not signed, we have a schedule updated, ready to go on the AFCFTA. I know, including talking to my bosom friends in Pretoria, that Nigeria has done what no signatory has done. Services. I bit the bullet. I organized the Nigerian Coalition for Services Industries. The two co-chairpersons are here, and I didn't do it from the NOTN. I got them from the private sector to do it. The chairman of the SBL and the head of the legal council at NSC. We have an updated services schedule. Are you listening to me, Mark?
Yes.
And yes, I wasn't sure he was reading, and I don't like being ignored. I wanted to get his attention. I'm turning the tables on him. So we're ready to, good man, look at me. And so we are ready to go on that as well. We are ready with that. And then our president, frankly, President Buhari in many ways has been majestic. You know, he's talked to us. He says, listen, it's a democracy. Mr. Sakwe, I know you want to go, but I'm not going to do this until you've gone around the country. You have to go around your country. When I say round the country, we went round the country. 3,500 natural persons, because we knew what we were going to do.
How many states?
We went to 6 states representing the geopolitical zones.
Areas, yeah.
We did 34 groups. We've been everywhere. I've stood on my feet. I've gone on my knees. I've lain flat on my back. I've gone, serious guys, forget my jiving on this. I have done what we needed to do, because I've been thrown from this horse. You don't get it done, particularly in a plural democracy like Nigeria. They're going to throw you down the chute if you're lucky. Otherwise, put you in a meat grinder. I'm trying to liven this up. So that's it. That's it, basically. We haven't. There's an area, it's not all perfect. And I tell you where we haven't worked, we haven't done what we should do, but there's a reason for it. We still need to engage with our National Assembly. We have talked to them. We have talked to the chairpersons with competent jurisdiction. We've reached out to them. We've had a good conversation. They've let me know what we need to do, but we need to have a full court press and engagement with them. But we are ready to do that as well. The final thing is one sentence: the regional economic communities. In our case, Nigeria, we are lucky. We've had an accident of circumstance, using Joy's expression in the morning, that works. Nigeria is chairing ECOWAS. President Buhari was elected in July or August. What does that mean? I can get what I want to get out of ECOWAS. And I'm determined to do it.
No
and
time like the present.
And the starting point is next week in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe. And you get a round of applause for that. Let's talk about what's happening on the ground, or in this case, what's happening in the air. Now, when we signed signed in Kigali, that 44 countries signed that document, it came off the back of a very important an important initiative, the Single African Air Transport Market. All of this is included in each other. It's all involved in each other, that and the free movement of goods and people. But I'll stick with what happens to possibly one of the most integral areas, industries, which is transport, and in particular the airlines, because the airlines are already expanding. We're seeing massive expansion from the likes of South African Airlines, Kenya Airways, and of course, I'd say arguably the leader, Ethiopian Airlines, that they're spreading and connecting us across Africa. And it's very important for this because we need to see each other. We need to actually, people need to move in order for this to happen. So it's great that we have the CEO, the man at the top of South African Airways Group, Mr. Vuyani Jurana, with us right over there. Because I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes now to talk in particular about your area and how the AFCFTA, what it means to you and your peers from the airline industry. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I must congratulate the organizers because often for too long we have spoken about the African potential. And when you look beyond that, there hasn't been for many decades enough effort to stitch together because the continent, when it's looked at collectively, it presents a huge opportunity. However, unless there are enabling policy instruments like what we are talking about today and the single African air transport market, all those instruments are necessary to actually create a platform to actualize the potential for Africa, and I'm of the view that we're in the right direction by putting the right instruments. Firstly, what the single African air transport market does, it presents opportunity to move beyond bilateral agreements. Often countries work on bilaterals in terms of traffic rights, and that tends to constrain the ability for air operators like ourselves and in different jurisdictions. It makes development very slow. And keep in mind that none of the, in my view, if you look at the transport network in Africa, the single biggest facilitator of trade in terms of transport system is still by far going to be air and air cargo, largely because the ground-based transport networks, especially for landlocked countries, it still needs huge development. So it's important that the skies are enabled for African players to be able to connect Africans and facilitate free movement of Africans in a much more easy and seamless way. So the decision around the single African air transport network creates that possibility. It facilitates an ease of engagement beyond just bilateral agreements. But what's important, though, is that none of this will succeed unless we go beyond just policy. We start to look at how we rebalance the economics. If the economics are not balanced around big players, big countries, small players in different jurisdictions, invariable issues of protect the markets will always be on the stumbling block. So we are in a domain, in an era of a sharing economy enabled by IT technology that begins to enable new business cases, new business model to trade, which enable the ability for business to work together. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's not good enough for, say, SAA, Ethiopia, Egypt, Kenya, as the big players to take advantage of the policy without enabling participation of different players, large and small, in different jurisdictions. Otherwise, the policy won't last long. It's important to rebalance the economics, ensure that we are able to ensure we are inclusive in approach within a very good commercial model. IT enablement creates a possibility to actually build businesses across a common platform. We should be able to stitch together assets that belong to different people and render them in the market as if they were owned by one company using different commercial models. And in that way, we will be able to sustain the intervention. Maybe my last comment on the air transport network is that unless we make it easy for Africans to travel, we lower the barriers to entry. Different countries still charge various fuel surcharges, which does drive the price of travel, the cost of travel. So we need to be able to bring a lot more low-cost framework in air travel so that more and more Africans can move around the continent. It's the movement should not be limited to those who are in high-income categories. Otherwise, the trade construct is not going to succeed unless we're able to address this. We need a much more holistic approach across the continent.
Now you're talking about Africans traveling across the continent. One that I know probably travels more than anyone here is Dr. Edem Azugenu, who's the special advisor to the Afro Champions Initiative, because you're always in a different country whenever I call, because the Afro Champions Initiative is just that. It's a Pan-African initiative with representatives from the four corners of this great continent. Most people, I hope, will know what the Afro Champions Initiative is, and certainly if you're in this intra-African milieu, you'll definitely know what the Afro Champions Initiative is. But I'll give you 4 minutes. I think you should start with demystifying, first of all, what is Afro Champions, or rather, why is Afro Champions? And then if you could talk about how the private sector could be brought more into the AFCFTA ratification process.
Thanks very much, Mark. So first, Afro Champions. So Afro Champions grew out of an opportunity we saw during the height of the Ebola epidemic that plagued a few African countries in 2014. And most of you would recall Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone being plagued by Ebola. And I got concerned about, watching the usual model of waiting for help from other countries in the world to come donate gloves and other things to help us. And I felt there was something we could do on our own. And as a doctor, I always say that if there's a hemorrhage anywhere, you don't go looking for help. You stop the bleed first. So the concern was, how do we contain the problem before it spreads to other parts of the continent? And to do that, we needed homegrown resources. And so together with the African Union, we brought together, using the convening power of the African Union, we mobilized a group of African multinationals who convened within a week of that invitation in Addis. And we mobilized about $38 million in pledges that day. And then also through short code, texting, and others, we managed to raise about $50 million. And then brought together a bunch of 250 volunteer doctors who, in December of 2014, were sent to Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. And by June of the following year, we had totally eradicated Ebola, of course, with the support of other international bodies. We felt extremely proud about that for two reasons. One, because this was our problem, and we were able to solve it ourselves. We were able to diagnose the problem, and we were able to target solutions towards it. We felt that if we could keep that same network of business leaders, private sector champions, as we call them, and begin to galvanize them around looking for solutions for all the other problems that are militating against the continent, from poverty to all the other things, we should be able to partner public sector to solve our problems and then bring others on board to help us. So that's what Afro Champions came out of. Afro Champions simply meaning those who, through whatever they are doing in their business operations, are championing Africa's economic transformation. But we all know that this transformation cannot happen without economic integration. Our markets are too small, and we're competing against continents or countries that are trading as one block, whether it's India, 1.2 billion people, China, 1.6 billion people, EU, America, and then you're talking about 54 countries in Africa, solo in the pecking order, but still producing basically the breadbasket of the world, the mineral resources that build the entire industrial complex of the rest of the world. So we needed to redefine who we were. It wasn't enough to just be ideological about it. We needed to know how these companies, through their cross-border operations, were integrating the African continent. And another thing we realized that was very consequential was simply this, that even though we're talking about the RECs coming together and integrating the continent, we failed to recognize that it is these private sector multinationals, who most of whom didn't exist in the last 20, 25 years old. You couldn't have mentioned a Dangote group 25 years ago, or an MTN, or an EcoBank, or many of these companies who, through their cross-border operations, are integrating Africa's economic markets. EcoBank has literally integrated 33 financial markets. Dangote Group, 22, MTN, 18, and you can go on and on and on. So who are these multinationals? Most of them came up without the strategic support of governments, and like you heard some of them say, they've had to be paying VAT maybe 4 or 5 times by the time they move one product from one country to the other. How do we bring them together under a platform where they can become a lobby vehicle to begin to support, get government to understand their needs, get the policymakers to create the kind of policies that will ensure that we can grow more of these multinationals and eventually move the continent into global emergence. Because until we're able to create African Samsungs and African GEs and African multinationals that can also compete globally, till this day we don't have one African multinational in the Fortune 500, whereas the Brazils and the Indias and China and others have many companies in their fund. So that's what really Afro Champions grew out of. Ratification. Once this organization was formed and we actually created Afro Champions as a club, and as you heard, is chaired by Dangote, we decided to move from defensive to offensive. So we moved straight into the AU. And we went and we got a great collaborating relationship with the Commission for Trade. First started with Ambassador Fatima and then now Commissioner Muchanga, where we went and said, listen, the private sector has been missing in all the conversations that are going on in terms of even the discussions, the negotiations that are formulating the policies that are going to impact upon the business they do. They are the ones who are crossing borders. So we want to be part of the discussion. And that's how we got involved. And we were at the launch of the CFTA in Kigali. We mobilized our members, and we committed $1 million towards a sensitization effort that has gone very well. I think together with Commissioner Muchanga, Babajide, who is in the room, we've already visited 5 countries. We've been to Cape Verde, we've been to Cote d'Ivoire, we've been to Senegal, we've been to Guinea.
Adam, were you hearing different things, or was there a sort of was there a consensus country to country from private sector about how they felt, what they wanted from the AFCFTA, or were they just different variety?
Well, it was quite intriguing. So for a country like Ghana, where I'm from, and Commissioner Muchanga will bear me witness, most of them, the Association of Ghana Industries, had never even met any of the government officials. None of the government officials have been there to even explain CFTA to them, even though Ghana had signed and was even about to ratify. Chambers of Commerce in Cote d'Ivoire, the Patronat, and even Senegal. We've had to bring even people from customs. We brought people from immigration, border control, all the people that we think are going to be very important in even understanding. Because how are you going to ratify, like Ambassador Sakwe said, something that legally ties you into how you're going to conduct business, and the people who conduct those business don't even understand what it means. So for us, for ratification to work, we have to involve, not so much of involving, but educate, because these things are in a very legal, complex, framework that would need to be broken down, and also to be contextualized within the needs of the people who we are trying to support in the CFTA effort. So the private sector is very important. We've heard so many concerns. We've also heard so many aspirations. I mean, most people are even comforted by the fact that who you are up against is not your multinationals from other countries. It's the SME from India and China and others who are riding on the back of their multinationals to dump their products and services in your market and play you out of position. So it is these things they need to understand. And I believe that, I always say that private sector is, a simple definition for me for private sector is anybody who is not on the government or public payroll. That's 90% in most countries of the population of every country. If you're able to mobilize that 90% of the population and help them to understand how this benefits them, what it actually means, what role they have to play, they will begin to bring the pressure to bear on their members of parliament, because they all have constituents in parliament, to be able to go and advocate for the signing and ratification. And I think we've started that process. We've appointed champions, Afro champions, who are our focal points in every country. And we've also appointed former heads of states and advocates within government who are working together with information and, of course, with the African Union, going and meeting with the members of parliament to sort of assist them with the information they might need to be able to ratify this process. We've done that successfully in a number of the countries that have already ratified, and we are prepared to continue with that.
A question, is Juliet Anama one of your Afro champions? No. Well, after this panel, she should be, because she's right to my right here. She's the CEO Jumia, and Jumia is arguably the most successful online intra-African platform. The future looks like it's for companies like yours, especially when we talk about the AFCFTA spreading the length and the breadth, because it's not always about physical goods, or it's about virtual goods and services increasingly. So what opportunities does the AFCFTA offer for companies like yours to further expand your geographical footprint, your scope, and your operations? What opportunities does it present, and what risks?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. I think if I start with the question of ratification before I come to the question that you asked, and if private sector entities were considered as parties to the ratification, I can say that we were probably one of the first to ratify, Ambassador Chiedo, if you recall. Because we definitely see that there's an opportunity there for trade, and in particular in digital platforms like ours. When Jumia was set up 6 years ago, so we're pretty young still, it was set up with a simple vision to change the lives of Africans using the power of the internet. Okay. And the way we saw the opportunity, we're not in any other continent. We have no mandate in Europe or Asia or anywhere else. The platform is exclusively for Africa. We look at it from perspective of 1.2 billion consumers and people in Africa who have needs for products and services, and 47 million merchants in Africa on the other side. So we see ourselves and our mission to connect the 1.2 billion consumers to the 47 million merchants in Africa. We started actually in Nigeria, and today we are in about 15 African countries and expanding further. There is a huge opportunity there for us in terms of signing with the ratification, because I always tell people, in digital, there are no boundaries. I mean, you have the luxury of boundaries in other industries, but in digital, there are no boundaries. So we're nimble, we're fast. Our competition is also participating in Africa. There are no boundaries there. Consumers have the freedom to order whatever they want to order online. So I look at it from perspective. The example I gave this example also at the SBL, was that today, if you take one country, Nigeria, and you have a merchant who's based in Lagos, okay, with the best of his abilities, that merchant can only know the demand that exists within the markets where he operates, whether it's an open market environment or whatever. That's the size of the opportunities he envisages. But when you bring him online, suddenly he's connected to consumers who are in Maiduguri or in Kano or in Ibadan, that he would never, by the limitations of transportation, information asymmetry, just not being able to have access to that information, he would have been limited. But now he has access to those consumers, and he can service those consumers. That's on a country level. And therefore, we have been able to see merchants who have increased their volume 10 times, 100 times, just because they have the access to a platform like that. Now, if you then look at that from the perspective of a continental, from a continental perspective, you can imagine the scale and the scope of opportunities that exist for 47 million merchants in the market. And the opportunity is also there because if you look at offline retail, today in the United States or in Europe, there are about 382 people to one single outlet. I'm talking about formal outlet like either a 7-Eleven shop or it's a Walmart or something like that. 382 people per outlet is the average. In Africa, it's 60,000 people to one. So the rate of expansion of offline is limited by so many things. The rate at which I can buy the land, the rate at which I can buy or rent the place, and it takes 2 years or 3 years to build a new, transportation, all those limitations. So we see digital as one opportunity that we really can use to leapfrog development, at least within the area of trade. And what it does is, because a digital platform creates a lot of transparency, transparency then drives efficiency, efficiency drives capital formation drives investment. So there's a feedback loop that happens when you are able to use the digital platform for what is meant to be. And that's facilitating a lot of trade, facilitating investment in Africa. We see a lot of that opportunity happening, and that's for us. It's a done deal.
But what do you want? I mean, you know who you are, you know the potential of what you have, but what do you want to see from this as they're heading towards signing, hopefully by Nigeria, and ratification by many other countries, including Nigeria? What, from your perspective, would you like to see? You're always very clear about this is what we need.
Yeah. It's very clear, two things. So the ratification is just a start of the process. The real value from a trade perspective is then having a common, efficient means of goods moving across borders in Africa. Today, it's much faster, much more efficient for goods to move from China to Nigeria than it is for goods to move from Kenya to Nigeria. And one of the things I would strongly recommend as part of the process is there needs to be, just like in a banking system, a financial system, there's a back-end inter-settlement process that happens, okay? For trade also, from a customs perspective, there needs to be an inter-settlement so that goods move freely. There's a digital trail of goods moving, and therefore you don't need to have the endless assessment and physical examination at borders. If the information on the movement of goods on a digital platform is already there. So at the back end, all you need is countries have a system with which we know the originating country, the destination country, what is the share of the tariff that is applicable to each entity. And it's cleared on a digital system.
And this should be a priority.
Yes, it should be a priority, yes. It should be a priority from my perspective. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. I know that some of the panel want to actually intervene when you say that, but I'll hold off. Well, let me just finish going through Bumi Makinwa. Bumi Makinwa, now you are from, let me get the name right, Unique? How do I say it?
You have to pay me to get this right.
Okay.
A unique eye.
A unique eye. A unique eye. I get it now. Okay, communications for leadership. Well, leadership is everything. In Africa, in Nigeria, elsewhere. I mean, what does leadership need to do with regards to the AFCFTA ratification? What would you like to see from your unique eye?
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me start by thanking the organizers, the four entities, starting with Rockefeller, the African Union, the ECA, and the government of Nigeria for bringing us together. I think this is, in a way, you will see how this leads and ties into leadership when I give a little bit of explanation here. When you hear continental free trade, one of the first things that occurred to me a few years back, and apologies to Ambassador Fatma. Yes. Also, my friend, Ambassador Sakwe.
1,000 apologies.
That I thought if it was free, why does it need so much talking? Free trade, everybody will want it. But then I saw that I was falling back into my old heart. As somebody who came from developmental progress, United Nations and all of those things. Because, you see, the biggest mistake that we make in development issues is thinking that a good idea is good enough. Or a good intention is good enough.
Especially in Africa.
But when you look at communication and you look at leadership, a good idea has as many chances of going wrong as anything. So what leadership, and Mark, now listen carefully here. I've taught you how to pronounce the name.
You've started something.
You see, what the leadership idea is all about is when you think of any idea or a service or a company, whether it be Jumia or South African Airways, or think of it as a leadership entity, as a leadership concept. If it is a leadership concept, the first thing that occurs to you is, who are you leading? Can you be a leader? Can somebody be a leader and be alone? You cannot be. In whichever language. In one language that I know very well, they say, anybody baba. It's only when you have people behind you, so to say, literally, that you can be a father, a leader. So, if your idea or your concept is a leadership concept, then you have to see, as has been said in many other words, who are the beneficiaries? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the key players? Call it whatever name you like, but there must be other entities that surround it that you really will take forward. That is leadership. So if the Continental Free Trade Area, CFTA, is going to be a leadership idea, we have to see what should it be surrounded with. And you can begin to think of this in really practical terms at least 3 important levels. The one is at the world or global level. What does it mean for a regional free trade entity to become effective? What are the implications for global trading and others? Secondly, at the regional level, and I don't need to get into details because many of the speakers yesterday and today have gone into details. How does the region understand it? The regional economic communities, the various countries involved, the key business leaders and global, business regional players, what roles are they playing? Other organizations that must know about it. And then at the third level, at a national level. And Nigeria, because we are in Nigeria, it's a very good example of what has been going on and what Ambassador Osakwe has explained. The kind of consultation, the kind of discussion, that's a leadership role. It is to generate, one, that there's clarity of vision. Clarity of vision. Where is the trade agreement taking us? Either at global level or at regional level. If that clarity of vision is shared with and understood by followers or even developed by them, the better. The second point I'd like to make about the clarity of ideas. The second one is, what is the intention? You have the vision, you have the intention to move on, and therefore, how is that intention bought into by others as a shared intention? In the ordinary market of business, you say needs. Did you identify needs? Is there a niche for what is going to be done? And do you create, thirdly, network or linkages? Linkages, again, keep in mind, because a leader doesn't stand alone. A leadership idea, a leadership service doesn't stand alone. What are the linkages with other existing ideas? For instance, in Africa, you have Agenda 2063. And if you look at the clarification, it is there. At the global level, you have Agenda 2030. You know, the vision of the SDGs. And besides that, you have other, as was said in one of the breakaway discussions today, you have several other agreements that have been made and that are linked to what we are discussing here. How do they interact? And how do they help to reach that vision that has been set? But having said that, I think I may stop at this stage, waiting for the next round for further discussion. But the final point, if I may, the final point is that we should keep asking ourselves 2 words. It's a critical question, and it is, so what? And that's why...
So what?
So what? And that's why a good idea is not good enough. Because if you say, this is what you want to do, you see, when you ask yourself, so what? Then you begin to see that it might be clear to that entity, to that individual. But so what for all the other entities? Do they get it? Are they on board? Are they moving with it? Because even ratification of the treaty, it is, so what? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's yours. And I think sort of crystal ball gaze into the future, and you think, what is the Africa we want through the CFTA ratification? Well, we want to alleviate youth unemployment. We want to unleash entrepreneurial dynamism. There are many things that we know what we want, right? And we're doing that because of these things. Now, the private sector, of course, is now being really brought into the conversation. So I'm going to move to Dotun Ajayi. He's the executive director for West Africa, where we are, for the African Business Round Table. So, Dotun, just give me your 4 minutes with regards to this, because I know that it's not just about profit when it comes to the African Business Roundtable. It's about transforming economies and lives as well. Where does the CFTA come into this? Ratification of the CFTA. You're a Nigerian, a Yoruba man, a Nigerian. And so maybe you want to specifically mention Nigeria in your 4-minute intervention.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me start by going the way of other speakers in thanking the organizers for putting this together. It's a timely platform which we all need. Africa actually needs this at this moment. Ratification, what steps need to be done? The ambassadors spoke about actors that we need to engage, but I want to take some time to look at actions that we need to take. The first thing is I look at why we need 22 countries, and we need that sometime early next year. Problem is, I try to put myself in the mind of policymakers in other countries, that if the biggest economy on the continent is shying away from signing, why should I be rushing in? So that tells me that we need to put, Nigeria needs to take the lead in this regard. If Nigeria signs, it's like unlocking a big lock, which opens other smaller locks. So that will serve as an encouragement to other countries to sign in. Having said that, I'm a Nigerian. Our Ambassador Osakwe should forgive me for this. I don't work for the government, but my hunch tells me that if Nigeria is going to sign this, that signature will not be on, that pen will not be on paper until mid next year. Election is in the air. I don't speak for the government, Ambassador Osakwe. Election is in the air, and it's already a political issue already. So, will the government that Ambassador Osakwe works for, would they want to politicize this further by signing or not signing? Opposition using it as a campaign, something. So, you may want to play safe and say, oh, let's just wait till after the elections before signing. So, but that's my personal opinion. I may be wrong. So that gives us about 8 months to deal with other issues and perhaps look at how we can encourage other countries to join. The first 3 key points I want to mention. The incentive structure needs to be well laid out. A situation in which you have 54 African countries still dealing in primary products, raw materials, that's not what and we produce the same thing. That's not what we want to trade within ourselves. It's the same common market. So what is the incentive for diversification? Much has been said about production yesterday. If Jumia needs to sell, but we need to produce first before you can trade.
It's because there's duplication everywhere.
Yeah.
And so how much thought is being put into, as we head towards the AFCFTA becoming a true reality, including diversification in the very fabric of the AFCFTA?
That needs to come out clearly from the AFCFTA.
You feel it needs to be articulated more
clearly,
the vision.
And let countries see, oh, this is what I'm gaining, not in the short or medium, but in the long term. That takes me back to the issue of countries signing or no signing. Africa, African leaders are very easy to be persuaded to sign on to do this. You remember how a lot of African countries went to sign the Statute of Rome to join the ICC. We're not talking about leaving the ICC, in a bang manner. So a situation in which we look at this clearly, think through it. What are the challenges?
Can I move over to my extreme right for the right to reply to that?
Please go
because
ahead.
I know that he's chomping at the bit to get in there. Ambassador Chiedu Osako, you heard that right there. I'm going to add my own question to it as well, so you're gonna get a double barrel pointed in your direction. Beyond that, how do we ensure? And actually, this question comes from, I wasn't here yesterday, and I didn't see Aliko Dangote speak, but I do know what he said, because I was with him on Tuesday in his office, sitting in his office, and he was about to leave, and he said, oh, so what are you doing this week? I said, I'm doing this thing with Rockefeller. He said, I'm there, I'll see you. I said, well, we're doing opposite days. And he said, well, this is what I'm going to say. He said, and I'm sure he said this yesterday, he said, I, as an industrialist, have the most to gain from the CFTA. I have the most to gain. I'm already Pan-African, and for me, it's easier for me to import goods from other countries or export them to out of Africa than it is to inside Africa. He mentioned Benin Republic specifically as giving him a headache. Yes, he said, but the thing is that most of these governments will smile and shake hands, but they won't honor what they're writing. The thing is, that's what it comes down to. How do we ensure implementation of commitments, yes? How do we incentivize countries even? How do we incentivize countries to walk the talk, so to speak? He said that there's going to be so much domestic resistance to reform within these different countries that we need a reality check. He said, I'm your big, I mean, he's Afro champion, effectively. But he said that is his main one question. I don't know if he said it yesterday, but he said it on Tuesday when I saw him. So I'm going to throw that one in as well.
Mark, he did. He did make the same points. But, you know, let me, as clearly as I can, say this. Number one, perhaps we all should listen to the point made by Alhaji Dangote. He's an African investor. He's in 14 countries plus. A number of our institutions, you've listened to Juliet, you listened to UBA in the morning in the panel, the plenary panel that over which you presided. They are major investors in Africa, and they are serious about making this work. And so they want to see the AFCFTA accompanied by an implementation plan, including trade logistics, and you heard Juliet, including policy reforms, and this would not be eternal. I mean, they're looking at this in the immediate to the medium term. A third point to make is, my brother, take my word, our domestic process is divorced from politics. Listen, if it were part of the political process, I'm on record, I would walk away. And I'm not looking for a job. And basically, at this stage, I'm not working for money. I'm on record. This is not a discussion in camera. The Nigerian domestic process on the AFCFTA is technocratic. There have been lots of mistakes in the past with regard to multilateral agreements. Did you know that the WTO agreement to which Nigeria is party is not part of Nigeria's domestic laws? Did you know it's not been domesticated? Did you know that ECOWAS...
We signed that under a military regime. I know about that.
No, but hold on. I mean, it's good to pontificate about these things. But people like me are in the head-butting exercise of getting things done. Did you know that the 1975 ECOWAS protocol that we were the architects of, Nigeria and Togo, is not part of our domestic laws? Let me repeat what I said yesterday, and perhaps you weren't there. There's a concentration of brain power in our economic management team, and they don't want to see these errors repeated. And so the touchstones for the domestic process is 1, consult, sensitize. 2, update. 3, modernize. 4, have a plan. 5, bring in stakeholders, not in an idealistic, stratospheric way, but bring them along in very practical ways. We are serious about this. And I have been in touch myself with my counterpart chief negotiators to conclude on this. The African Common Market, now called the AFCFTA. If you were here yesterday, my brother, you would have heard me quote from the first statement of the first foreign minister of Nigeria, the late Prime Minister of Nigeria, 24th of May 1963, at the very first meeting of the Organization of African Unity. It's Nigeria's idea. Read the statement. It's in the archives of the OAU. This is not political gaming issues. The people who are thinking about this cerebrally, seriously, pragmatically, because they want to get it done. I am part of that regiment.
Very, very strong words. Okay, I'm going to step off the stage. This is the final panel, so this is your final opportunity to be a panelist, effectively. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to ask you to help me. Put your hands up, and this is your panel. You can ask them any question regarding these issues. I'll come to this gentleman here first. If you can stand up, tell me your name, what you do, and what you want to say. Stand up.
My name is Adebayo Adedokun. I teach economics, University of Lagos. I just want to touch on the issue of trade in services. I notice we have been emphasizing trade in goods, and our youth are actually interested so much in trade in services.
Trade in services,
particularly yes. ICT. If we look at Nigeria, we discover that a lot of young people are interested in ICT, but our focus should also look at trade in services, how we can domesticate ICT for young people, and how we can also look at ICT that can also help our continental free trade area. That's one. Number two, we should also look at the aspect that has to do with the technological progress. If we want this thing to work, there are so many technology for the future that we really need to look at. I'll give you an example. Flying drones will soon be used for delivery services in the global world. So what are we doing about all these issues that could help our youth? Thank you.
I'm not going to go to you. I know I can see Juliet's, obviously this is yours, but also, I mean, technology is at the center of what you do in the aviation industry. Maybe, yes, let's just answer it. Go ahead. I'll break my system.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a very important point that you are raising. It's important that as we look at Africa's development, we understand the interconnectedness of the various areas. So far, it tends to be more like swim lanes. We're dealing with trade, we're dealing with aviation, we're dealing with this. It's important that we stitch together ICT enablement, whether it's with customs and exercise, making sure that the manifest on cargo can actually be transmitted to the customs authorities on the other side to actually fast track the clearance of goods. Very, very important. What's critical on ICT in particular is what type of interventions can be put in place to help the African continent leapfrog its own development, whether it's in healthcare, education, agriculture. The African Development Bank has a program of Feed Africa. That cannot be achieved unless we are able to stitch together clear ICT intervention in agriculture. The production side of agriculture in Africa is largely comprising of smallholder farmers, which needs to be assisted through technology integration to get to scale for offtake, for export purposes. So I think the point you're making is critical. ICT will be the integral part of making sure that Africa can trade with itself using technology, deep analytics, as well as data analytics as well. So it's an important part of what needs to be done, whether in aviation, on logistics. It's very important to make sure that we invest, we include it in all these discussions as an enabler and facilitator of trade.
Juliet of Jumia, CEO.
Yeah, I think he's covered it, most of the key points regarding his question. The only thing I would add is to say that we see that technology is perhaps the only lever we have left to leapfrog. I always say that we've missed the Industrial Revolution. We're not going to catch up. We've missed potentially for us to catch up in terms of physical infrastructure will probably take us another 30 years. But digital, and we see what young people, like you said, are doing with digital, is one platform, one technology, one lever that we really can use and leverage in Africa to leapfrog.
And we have the demographic opportunity because we're the youngest continent.
We have the demographic opportunity as well. And what digital does is it can help us to do things at a scale that are completely impossible for us to do in a physical environment. So some of the things you're talking about, services, yes. When I launch a campaign, I can, within seconds, because of deep analytics I can do, I can know the number of services people are requesting for. I can see the types of specifications of those services that they're asking for. And I can feed that information back to the service providers and say, look, this is the price point customers want to pay for it. This is the specific specification that they're looking for. And these are the kinds of services they're looking for. You know, like I was saying before, that kind of information, what does it drive? It drives better understanding of where investments should go to. So definitely we need technology, and technology is the only way we run on a digital platform anyway. Okay.
Is there a lawyer in the house? One over here. Yes, stand up. You've got a question, haven't you?
Actually, I have a comment. Yes, I just wanted to align myself with Ambassador Chiedo Sakwe. About a week ago, our president inaugurated a committee on the impact and readiness for signing the AFCFTA. And we're given 12 weeks, only 12 weeks, yes, to come up with that report. So certainly, if the government was inclined to politicize this, we would have been given perhaps 3 months to do the work so that perhaps elections would have come and gone before we conclude that process. Exactly. So I just wanted to bring that out, that I think the government is very serious about concluding the process expeditiously, and I'm optimistic that indeed we'll be signing it very soon.
Just out of interest, are you his lawyer, personal lawyer? No. Okay. I can't pay him either. So I was just thinking, wow, you have deep pockets, Ambassador. Okay. Let's see. Can I just go over to another country? I'll come back to you, because what's interesting, and somebody said this, I don't know which one of you said this, about when we think of the CFTA, I think it was you, Fatima, that we're not talking about, yes it was, we're not talking about drawing our wagons in a circle and closing our doors and just trading with each other. We're creating an environment that makes sense, even for other companies and countries that want to come in with the development of Africa in mind, right? That they come together. It just makes it easier for them, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel in every country they go to. And people should shed their minds thinking that this is bad news for global trade. We want to increase global trade in Africa. Now, one of the economic miracles through the decades has been the country of Brazil. Brazil, yes, which has African roots to a great degree. So I'm just going to come over to this gentleman over here, who is very much involved in Brazil, because he's Brazilian, but also Africa, the Brazilian-African business, let me get this right. What is it called? The Brazil-Africa Institute. He's João Bosco Monte. Stand up, sir. You put your hand up, so I'll give you the mic.
Thanks, Mark. You make us awake. Thank you. So just a comment. Yesterday and today, I did not hear from the panelists the word training, education, right? So maybe you have to put in the agenda for the Africa Trade Forum 2019, how can we train people for this new technology of trade agreement? If we bring people from the private sector, like Aliko Dangote and many other people, they know already what they want to do. But people that are starting to think about trade for the next decade, we need to train them properly. Maybe the African champion, Dr. Eden, could address what you have in mind, what we're doing to work with the universities, work with the companies to train people that will be on the ground for the next years.
Our brother from Brazil is simply talking about what they call soft skills. Very essential.
So I would answer by saying two things. One of the flagships of Afro Champions. So the mantra of Afro Champions is from local champions to Afro champions, from Afro champions to global giants. Because we're very clear that if by 2030 we have not created a critical mass of African champion companies who have the capacity to grow at scale, build complex operations, be able to do R&D, etc., and be competitive. We might as well forget it. And so CFTA is one of the things that gives us access to larger markets. We also agree that until we're able to build infrastructure, the quickest things to be able to integrate, and if you look at the membership of Afro champion companies, the multinationals, most of them were the ones who were able to move services, finance, technology, because those are the things that are quicker to move. When you start talking about goods and other things, just the logistical nightmare of being able to move, say, cotton from Mali all the way to South Africa and process and bring it to a country like Ghana, competing against your Golden Triangle where they have cheap hydro in Vietnam and places like China and good infrastructure. That's why people are saying it's easier to bring goods from elsewhere. So, of course, goods is going to have to be at the back of the bus, making sure that infrastructure has to be put in place. That's one of the things that the Afro champions want to be partake of and be able to partner government using more innovative blending finance methods to be able to start building some of those infrastructure, in the case of energy, for example. But to answer to Bosco's question, it's very simple. One of the flagships of Afro Champions is John Doe Fellowship. And this is a flagship we built named after Gervais John Doe, the founder of EcoBank and ASCI. And this fellowship creates or identifies the next generation of the Aluku Dangotes and the multinationals, or basically what we are calling the local champions. What we've done is we've partnered with the Gordon Institute of Business Science in Johannesburg, and we're taking business cases of these companies, because most MBA cases now are about foreign companies, etc. This is the first courses we're doing. Our first course just came out of John Doe Fellows, just came out last year, where we're taking business cases of these companies who we saw emerge in the last 10, 15 years, who are breaking all the barriers. And the barriers are very simple. It's not just about language and everything, but it's about also how these companies are moving the small companies within their value chain. And so these are some of the things that you'll find under the John Doe Fellowship Program. I also have to say that Afro Champions, we have a charter that these companies sign. And one of the fascinating things we are finding is foreign companies that have shown interest in signing the Afro Champion Charter to subject themselves to some of those principles of being able to identify themselves as Afro Champion companies. So thank you very much.
Yes. Actually, what I'm going to do is say we've got to round up this. Apologies to the young man who wanted to ask a question because we've run out of time. I started with the number, do you remember the number I said? Remember? 22. And I'm going to finish with the number 22. And I'm going to finish with the lady who started us with the CFTA. Have I lost you already? No. Okay. Which is Fatima Harama Seal. We're looking now at ratification 22. How optimistic are you with such a misty optic that we are actually going to get there and they're going to be ratified? How optimistic? If you are very optimistic, why are you very optimistic?
Thank you very much.
Yes. Bring it close.
Hello? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm optimistic. I think that we don't have the luxury of failing. That's not an option. That's the first thing. I think the commissioner with his team, with all the proper people in this room and outside of this room will make it happen. I'm confident. I think that there is an analysis, a serious analysis on the field in every separate country to say that this is our issue, identifying what is the problem and how we can come with a tailored solution to respond to their need. That's one thing. The second thing, I think is very important for our countries. Agenda 2063 has not been prepared by the AUC. It has been prepared with all the African youth, women, all part of society. In Africa, the Africa we want is the African ideas. And that's what form Agenda 2063. All our countries have, by 2025, there will be emerging countries. I think it's very important that they reconcile their emerging national plan to the first year, 10-year plan of the Agenda 2063, so that they can know where to invest for example, infrastructure related. Whatever that is a blocking for example, to not signing this AFTA. So it's very important that we prioritize, and then they can understand the benefit of what's going on. And the last thing is, again, I want to say that political involvement is at all levels. You know, the people from the private sector, the civil society, researcher, sectorial ministers are very important. Minister of Finance needs to be implicated in that deals, because Minister of Trade sign agreements. But when it comes to loss of revenue, it's Minister of Finance. So they need to understand the issues of what we're losing, how we're going to compensate it, how long it takes, can we put it on our national plan, and so forth. And I'm confident that the team we have is going to do it, and Africa will deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you all one final question? Will you please rise? Stand up, please. Stand up, stand up, stand up. And give them a round of applause, please. Our final panel. That's our final panel. And weren't they great? I said I had riches in my panel. Thank you so much. If I can now ask you to exit the stage, we're going to do the closing ceremony now. Now, I hope I see everyone on this panel. And, oh, they want to take a family photo. Family photo. Yes, family photo. Come together. Okay, Adam, there you go. Yeah, I should, kind of. I'm the adopted son of the family. Okay, here you go. That was front page stuff, I'm sure. I am sure you're going to see everyone that was on that stage again if you join us at the first ever Intra-Africa Trade Fair to be held in Cairo, on the 11th to the 17th of December. This is the first ever Intra-Africa Trade Fair being organized by Afrexim Bank, UNECA, African Union, and the government of Egypt are all putting that together. It is an absolute must attend event. 75,000 people will be attending that, with over 1,000 exhibitors. A very big deal. Hippolyte Fofak talked about it again. So I'll see you in Cairo from the 11th to the 17th. Now, we're not done yet because we have some closing remarks to be made, which will bring these very fruitful 2 days to an end. It's been very fruitful, hasn't it? Has it been fruitful? Has it been fruitful?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You hear that? Absolutely. Okay. So let's see. If I could now call upon, he's the Director of Regional Integration and Trade Division for the Economic Commission for Africa, based in Addis, and representing the Executive Secretary Vera Songwe. I'd like to call upon Stephen Karingi to make some remarks, please. You can use the podium. I think this is live, right? Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm standing here on behalf of the Economic Commission for Africa, led by Dr. Vera Songwe. Let me start by acknowledging His Excellency Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, the Chief Trade Negotiator, Nigerian Office of Trade Negotiation. His Excellency Albert Muchanga, the Commissioner for Trade and Industry at the African Union Commission. Ms. Christine Henan, the Vice President, Global Policy and Advocacy, the Rockefeller Foundation. Mr. Mamadou Bite, Managing Director for the Rockefeller Foundation's Africa Regional Office. Her Excellency Fatima Haramasil, the Vice President for CEMAC. The organizing teams for this event, ECA, the Rockefeller Foundation, Create International, and our other logistics partner, Popsicle. Now, you'll agree with me, we're leaving here with some main messages which have come out of the forum, and in general, I would like to mention three. The first message that is clear from the conversations that have taken place over the last 2 days is that while governments need to set a conducive environment through collective and coordinated actions, the private sector needs to be the main driver of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Another message is that complementary interventions to boost competitiveness and reduce the high costs of doing business on the African continent will be crucial to ensuring a win-win gains from the AFCFTA. And obviously, this will require proactive policies and programs in the areas of infrastructure, financing, skills development, trade facilitation, and quality infrastructure. And thirdly, in implementing the CFTA, we must also make sure not to forget the MSMEs, women traders, smallholder farmers, and informal cross-border traders who represent the majority of Africa's trading community and are crucial to driving poverty reduction efforts. We did actually have several breakout sessions, and allow me to highlight maybe one or two things that came out of these sessions. In the breakout session on power, one of the things that was clear from that session was that the establishment of new business models, including renewable energy mini-grids, are going to be key to ensuring efficient and sustainable access to electricity and helping to fill the existing gaps. In the area of data is going to be critical for the implementation of the AFCFTA. Countries, regional economic communities, the African Union Commission itself need to understand trade patterns to determine the correct strategies. And it's also important to note that data is going to be central to the monitoring of the AFCFTA. I think in that breakout session, it was clear that Africa needs to design a data economy strategy to ensure that it is not vulnerable through data exposure and the other things that go with that. In the session that dealt with agriculture, the key message there was that the AFCFTA, by integrating African economies, offers opportunities for the continent to reduce its food imports from the rest of the world by increasing intra-African trade of processed agro-food products. Obviously, within the session, it was clear that for this to happen, effective implementation of the agreement is key. Now, those are just some of the sessions, but let me highlight some of the next steps as we see them from the context of ECA, based on the conversations that we had here over the last 2 days. Now, in the area of the AFCFTA national implementation strategies, I would like to mention that the ECA, with the financial support of the European Union, is offering technical assistance to support member states in developing comprehensive AFCFTA national implementation strategies. And as was clear from the session, these strategies will help to identify the new opportunities for diversification, industrialization, and value chain development. They will also help to identify current constraints to intra-African trade, which countries must address, also to recommend steps required for each country to take full advantage of national, regional, and global markets in the AFCFTA context, as well as aligning their existing policy frameworks at the national, regional, and continental levels. Now, the ECA, we are making an invitation to the Nigerian government and the private sector, especially the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria and the Nigerian Coalition of Services Industry, to prepare an official request for assistance in developing a national AFCFTA strategy, if that is necessary, to build on what they have been doing, so that we can work together towards concretizing the significant and impressive preparations that they have already undertaken. Now, another step in terms of the way forward is the organization of additional forums. This forum that we have convened together with our partners is not a standalone forum, but part of ECA's broader strategy to serve as a think tank, not only for African policymakers, but also for the African businesses and international partners who are engaged in the business of our continent. We plan to hold at least another 2 forums in the other African sub-regions early next year to build upon the success of this forum and engage with stakeholders from across the continent. Now, clearly this forum has highlighted the crucial importance of advocacy, consultations, and consensus building, and therefore we must intensify these efforts to move forward. In the area of another area that we think is important as a way forward is on with the development partners session, where it was clear that development partners will also play a crucial role in the implementation phase of the CFTA. And I can report that today the UNDP did request ECA to organize a meeting to coordinate member state assistance on the AFCFTA, a request that we well received. And so our commission will work to ensure that a dedicated session to engage with the development community, country, and regional offices, including the UNDP, the African Development Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, will be organized at the next Continental Forum on AFCFTA implementation. Now, obviously, I can't finish without me once again thanking the Rockefeller Foundation for reaching out to ECA to co-organize this forum. And like ECA, supporting inclusive development is at the core of the Rockefeller Foundation's work, and indeed inclusivity has emerged as a central theme in the last 2 days. Now, I would also want to express my gratitude to the federal government of Nigeria, and of course the government of Lagos State for hosting us here in Lagos, and also for their dedicated support and collaboration in the lead up to this forum. Now, again, although Nigeria has not yet signed the CFTA, it is in many ways, many steps ahead in ensuring that the agreement is a real game changer for economic transformation and development for this country and the continent when the signature takes place. The participatory and consultative efforts of the government of Nigeria has taken to sensitize stakeholders on the CFTA are truly commendable. Consensus building, once again, is key to ensuring that opportunities of the CFTA are optimized and the challenges of intra-African trade are overcome. Finally, I would want to take this opportunity to recognize ECA's strong and long-lasting relationship with our sister organization, the African Union Commission, which has provided us with the indispensable platform to support the AFCFTA process. We look forward to continuing our work with the AUC in the implementation and monitoring phases of the CFTA. But allow me to take 1 minute to recognize my colleagues, my own colleagues, who have actually been working very hard on this. Many of you have interacted with Lily Sommer. Lily has actually been the project manager for this event within the ECA. I want to recognize her efforts, of course, working under the leadership of David Luke, and Adeyemi Adeyinka, and there are other ladies who are probably not in this room, Eden Laku, Mamayanesh Teshome, Zedutu Pefekadu, Senaitu Afrawak, because without these colleagues, I wouldn't actually be standing here and feeling proud as I am because of the results we've been able to achieve. So I thank you very much for listening, and believe that the time that we have spent here is worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stephen Karingi from the ECA there. Now, sitting next to me is Samuel. Samuel has sat through 2 days of this. You've been here. Well, how has it been, Samuel?
This is what Africa actually needs. A great conversation. I think there's a good way forward, and we look forward to a success in this regard.
From your mouth to God's ears, definitely. Now, to make this possible, we've needed a lot of partners. ECA has just come forward, but it would not be possible, you heard it, without the Rockefeller Foundation. So I'm going to call upon Christine Heenan. She's the Vice President of Global Policy and Advocacy for the Rockefeller Foundation. Madame, take the stage. Give her a round of applause, please.
Thank you. It is always hazardous being a closing speaker. The challenge is, as they've said, everything has been said, but not everyone has yet said it. So I'm going to try to not do too much repeating. We got a very good summary of our breakout sessions. What I want to do is just talk a bit about our work at the Rockefeller Foundation, why we feel strongly about forums like this one, and then just leave you with some of the big ideas that I've heard over the course of the last 48 hours. I do want to start with a thank you to our partners. We are big believers, as you heard from Mamadou, in partnership as one of our core strategies at the Rockefeller Foundation. And our partners at ECA, at the African Union, and of course our host, the Nigerian government, really helped make today possible. I loved hearing it's what Africa needs, and we're honored and privileged to be a part of that, so thank you. I then want to talk a bit about thanking my own colleagues, Mamadou, who you heard from over the course of this convening, but also Wadzi and Chiang and Regina and Betty, most of us who sit in New York and send so many, roughly half of our grant resources to Africa to make sure they are well stewarded and having an impact and making a difference and strengthening, rely on our partners on the continent, and so it's so nice to be with them in person and meet their colleagues and be part of this conversation. So as Mamadou said yesterday, our unit, Global Policy and Advocacy, sees our mission as fourfold. First, setting the table for progress, which is why we really love convenings like this that can advance conversation toward an end. How many of us have sat through forums where we've said, oh, very interesting conversation, but you don't have a high optimism that anything will actually come of it? To us, the judge of a great conversation is it leads to action, and that action leads to progress. So I feel very optimistic about this forum in that regard. Secondly, we like to shape the conversation. And Mamadou talked about the online poll taken online. We've heard a lot about digital in the last while here. And this poll, I think we found very compelling. I think we have our results through yesterday, through the end of the day yesterday, which show us that in 1 week we had roughly, this is now above 1,400 respondents from 36 African countries. 83% of respondents said they believe in the importance of the agreement to Africa's development. We find that very compelling, and this poll will be open for 1 more week, and we'll share all of the results, but it seems to me a very good sign. So our work at Rockefeller is in the areas of food, energy, healthcare, data and technology. We see progress when all of those things can flow more freely here in Africa. So with that, I want to just end with some of the big provocative ideas that I'll take away and take back to New York from the conversation over these last 2 days. One, I thought Vice President Osinbajo's point about the importance of engaging stakeholders, I think is true for all of us at whatever stage in the ratification process. Ongoing stakeholder engagement remains very important. Aliko Dangote talked about building on strong foundations. I take that to mean that foundations can continue to be strengthened even as progress continues. Trade Minister Inamala talked about manufacturing as a driver of economic transformation. Someone on the last panel said you can't trade what you can't produce, right? So the importance of thinking about production and manufacturing and not just what happens next. Vera Songwe, I thought it made very compelling comments about holding ourselves accountable to ways in which trade benefits small and very small businesses, that we should make sure that all businesses benefit from the implementation of the agreement. And Ambassador Muchanga, I really thought your point earlier today about Africa's history of coming together to shape its own destiny was very inspiring and very applicable in this moment. Talking earlier with the IMF, the importance of good policy coming from good data. Again, on the last panel, it was described as a data trail. I think is something we should all take away from. We really think a lot about data, good digital ID, what that means at the Rockefeller Foundation, and look forward to more work on that area in Africa in the years to come. And finally, in talking to Ambassador Leonard earlier today, her discussion about Africa being a more compelling force on the world stage in trade is such an opportunity. And we've heard a lot about the role of financing in all sectors and it taking all of us. That notion that a good idea by itself doesn't advance, and the importance of really bringing all sectors together. So, I think while it's clear that important considerations remain, it's also clear that increasing opportunity and unlocking prosperity are solvable problems, and they are solvable soon. Yesterday, the manufacturing leader who talked about this being Africa's time made me think about the demographics, about how young this continent is. Roughly half of the people being 18 and younger. So I think about, when we think about this being Africa's time, we think about an agreement like this, it's really not about our future as much as it is about their future. which I think is that's the note I'll leave you on. To the extent that it's Africa's time, it's time in terms of the generations that will follow and all the opportunity that can be unlocked on their behalf. Thank you on behalf of Rockefeller for our role in this convening. It's been great to spend these 2 days with you.
Christine Heenan, Vice President of Global Policy and Advocacy for the Rockefeller Foundation. One more round of applause, please. Now I'll call upon a gentleman who you've heard quite a bit from over the last 2 days and an instrumental figure in all this. He is the Trade Commissioner for the African Union Commissioner. He is Ambassador Albert Muchanga.
Thank you very much, Director, of this last segment of our very important forum. I think I also join colleagues in expressing words of gratitude to a number of people and organizations. First and foremost, the co-organizers listed here. I think they've produced really good results by convening this forum. And in respect of that, I would also like to thank each and every one of you, because without your coming here, without your engagement, I think we would not have been where we are. It has been summarized as to the results that came out. I think that goes to show that you contributed very, very enormously. And of course, I'm standing here because I've got a number of very able people behind me. And sometimes they really push me, but we get along, and I do what they are bidding. In this particular meeting, I only have one of them, Babajide Sodipo, very able senior trade advisor. He has always facilitated my work. The other team is in Addis Ababa. We are here because of a long history. The establishment of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, the establishment of regional economic communities, starting with ECOWAS in 1975, and moving on to 1991, when our leaders adopted the treaty establishing the African Economic Community, to establish the community in 34 years, which is coming in the year 2028, which is not too far from here. And then around 2002, the adoption of the Constitutive Act of the African Union. And in 2012, when the leaders said we need to have greater stamina, we need to move faster to create the continental free trade area by 2017. And negotiations were opened up in June 2015, as indicated by my sister, who was holding the fort of Commissioner for Trade and Industry at that time. And the conclusion of the negotiations in December 2017, the signing on 21st March 2018 this year, and then opening it up for signatures and the process of negotiations by countries and consultations. So this is where we have been. And in all this, Africa has studied where they've needed to study the matters. But at the end of the day, Africa has said, analysis is good, but we are not going to be paralyzed by analysis. We are going to move on the basis of available information. And certainly the agreement that is before us is not very, very perfect, but it can enable us to start the way forward. And when you look at Agenda 2063, the last words there are the Africa we want. And when you look at those words, the message that comes out is that it is us, Africans, to create the future that we want. It's not going to be anybody to do it for us. We have to do it by ourselves. So the African Continental Free Trade Area was designed by ourselves with support of some cooperating partners, and it has to be implemented by ourselves. So we need to strongly believe in ourselves that we can do it, and I think we are going to do it. And in this respect, one key important issue is the alignment of views and alignment of actions. And here I would like to commend the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for taking a very deliberate step to ensure broad stakeholder consultations and involvement on how to go about it in signing the agreement. And I think this process of being together is part of the input, and certainly Africa has a lot to learn on how to engage in very broad-based stakeholder consultations. At the end of the day, the African Union Commission, agencies like ECOWAS, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, are governments that are owned by member states. When these organizations are weak, the blame should not be on the regional, the secretariats in those regional or continental organizations. The ball stops with the member states. That's where it is. So if these organizations are weak, the member states must blame themselves. They should take responsibility and do some introspections to say, what do we need to do to make sure that the organizations really work with the dynamism and really work with the force? So when now we are establishing the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, very hard decisions have to be made as to the question of sovereignty, as to the question of speed. And here it will be the member states to say, this is what we want to do. And in this respect, there are going to be challenges. And I think the most important message here is that challenges are part of life. I think they should really not intimidate us. When we see challenges, let's look deep and say, within these challenges, are there opportunities for their solution? And in quite a number of cases, that is going to be the reality. I think when we face the challenges, there are opportunities to ensure that we meet those challenges. And the other factor of life is that immediately you solve one challenge, another challenge emerges. It's a continuous process. So we should not be intimidated by the huge challenges that we face in the African Continental Free Trade Area. The day the agreement was signed, I came up with a list of challenges that we are going to face. At that time, there were 56, and the number is going and is going to grow, but we are resolving some of the challenges in the process. One of the key concerns which came up during this meeting is that it's very, very difficult to really trade among ourselves if there are enormous barriers. Those barriers can be of a physical nature, those barriers can be of a technical nature, and sometimes they involve fiscal barriers related to taxation. In this respect, we as African Union Commission, who are literally the interim secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, are coming up with a roadmap on the development of the internal market, which is going to really give indications on our suggested steps on how to remove these barriers. Because if we do not, then it will be very, very difficult to trade. At the end of the day, the experiment succeeds if really we have tangible results coming out of the efforts of our traders. And therefore, we are committed to resolving those challenges. 6 of our countries have not yet signed, and 2 of them indicated that they've signed by December this year. And we are encouraging all the 6 countries that really would like to have the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area being an agreement where all the African Union member states are state parties, founding state parties. The word to emphasize here is founding state parties. Why am I saying so? If we reach the minimum number of 22 ratifications, states that sign afterwards become member states by accession. Now, we would like all our countries to really avoid that and become founding state parties. Now, having said that, let me conclude by saying Africa is resolved and really committed to ensure that we succeed in this enterprise of the African Continental Free Trade Area. There is no going back. There will be challenges, but we are resolved to meeting them. And I think with the contributions from you, we'll be better armed to meet those challenges. So once again, thank you very much. And this is a continuous process, and certainly some of you will be meeting them in the next forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Albert Muchanga, the Trade Commissioner for the African Union Commission. I will go to another ambassador to take us across the finishing line now. Your final speaker, you heard him earlier on the panel, one of a passionate evangelists and advocate, not just for Nigeria, but for the whole of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Trade and Industry of the African Union Commission. In her absence, my brother, Stephen Karingi, Director, Research and Regional Integration in the UN Economic Commission for Africa. Recognizing, of course, that it was opened yesterday by Ms. Vera Sangwe. Madam Christine Heenan, Vice President, Media, Communications, and I believe Policy, as well at the Rockefeller Foundation, and your colleague, Mamadou Biteye, Managing Director, Rockefeller Africa. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Minister Enelama has asked me to make closing remarks on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. And in doing so, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of diplomatic missions, stakeholders, counterpart chief negotiators, and all invited guests. Let me make a few points as I conclude and to use Akedo's expression, bring this over the finishing line. Yesterday, the Africa Trade Forum, you listened to the keynote statement by His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In his welcome remark, what I believe that all participants noted was a serious systemic process of due diligence, of debate, outreach, capacity building, compromise building, and broadening the base of consensus that is ongoing in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I believe that His Excellency, our Vice President, was clear in a statement that this matters for the rule of law, not just in Nigeria, but on the continent, for economic governance, and also for reasons of transparency. And yesterday you heard our colleagues from the African Union Commission, from UNECA, and from the Rockefeller Foundation initiate a process that had not previously been undertaken on this continent. They've helped us to put together an Africa Trade Forum. And I believe that one of the points that we shall take away with us, I hope we take it away with us, is the point that was made by Managing Director Mamadou Biteye, that this is not an event. This is not an activity. He said yesterday that this is the initiation of a process on the continent of capacity building, of outreach, of expanding and broadening the base of consensus apropos trade policy issues. Why? And that is the other point I think we should take away with us. And that was the point that was made at the opening meeting by Ms. Vera Sangwe about how trade policy and associated negotiations have gone to the top of the global policy agenda, well beyond Africa. And that we needed to take an interest in this and wonder why this is the case. And she answered yesterday, and it should be part of the focus of the closing ceremony, that she said it has to do with drivers for growth, drivers for poverty reduction, women's empowerment, modernization, and job creation. Another point that I would like to make on behalf of our government as we conclude, and my mind went to it as a key point in the closing highlights, based on what Ambassador Muchanga said about those who will not be part of the original 22, then joining on the basis of an accession process. I understand it. I was WTO Director of Accessions for 8 years, doing the accessions of Russia, managing it. Liberia, Seychelles, Vanuatu, Sao Tome, Principe, several others. Done a number of this, and I understand what he's saying. But what's the point here? And I think it needs to be part of the closing point that we should bear in mind, that on trade and in building a free trade area, we need to be at ease, completely at ease, with the process of debate on trade policy issues. And what are the debates we've had so far over the past 2 days? It's important. Think about the debates. The debate on cost. The debate on cost versus benefits. The debate on whether it's free or free and regulated. The debate on learning the lessons that would apply to domestic reforms. We have to deal with what the European Union has dealt with over a long period, and they are at ease with it. And here it needs to be a key part of our closing understanding that we need to be thoroughly at ease with the process of debate in a democratic, rules-based process of consensus building. We have to be at ease with those who challenge our ideas, challenge our approaches, and challenge our methodologies. If we're not at ease with it, then we'll have a process with building the internal market and constructing the AFCFTA. It leads me to the next point, that I think that we should pay tribute in particular to the Rockefeller Foundation. And that poll that you showed, it has Nigeria all green and no red. But it's more than having Nigeria all green. That was anecdotal just to excite this reaction. What your poll says is that only 9% do not agree with it. I just saw it. This is what I've retained. That 83% support it. In other words, and here is the point, that the vast majority across the continent think well of the AFCFTA. We are on a very good track. And I think that poll by Rockefeller, we should applaud and ask the Rockefeller, don't keep it open, as you have said, for a week. Keep it open until the end of the Christmas period. No, seriously, keep it open. Keep it open. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Mark. I saw it as you did. There was no choreography. There was no pre-planning. I saw it as you did. This is the evidence that supports what you guys have done over the past 24 hours, what Muchenga has led, what Vera, what Fatima Asil, Stephen, David Luke, and lots of friends here, including my counterpart negotiation. Look at that. This is the beauty of democracy. And it's open, and it's online. As I begin to conclude, we can do this, and I hope it's a takeaway point. Rockefeller could give us this because of the benefits of the 21st century digital economy. Not making rules for the digital economy as part of the closing remarks of the Federal Republic of Nigeria would be extremely foolish. We have to make rules for the digital economy. It's the reality. Not only does it support the benefits of democracy, it supports the actions by people like Julia and Emma working in the area of e-commerce and dealing, I'm using the figure I believe she gave or less than of 47 million merchants. Think about it. We have to bring to them the benefits of the AFCFTA. And so, on behalf of the government of Nigeria, now to say, finally or penultimately, in moving to stage 2, I need us to have as part of our closing remarks an understanding that there will be a stage 2. We're only dealing with the issues in stage 1. There will be stage 2, and we should get into it and also think of the stages that will follow, because the AFCFTA has elasticity. In conclusion, the thanks to the African Union Commission, to UNECA, to Rockefeller, to those that Mark, my eloquent brother, has not yet thanked, to the interpreters. You see those men and women there who interpret what we do, and there as well. If we could give, but we haven't finished before the applause, to the men and women of Sheraton at 4 Points, the hotel that has accommodated our meetings over the past 2 days. And finally, on behalf of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I thank you all for visiting. I hope you go away not just representing your organizations, but acting as ambassadors of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Ambassador, don't move. Don't step off that stage. I'm going to ask Christine, please join him on the stage. We love to take photos here in Nigeria. I think, gentlemen, please, Stephen Keringi and also Ambassador, please join us. Let's get a photograph of, first of all, where's the photographer? Quick, let's take a photograph of the representative of the organization that made this possible. Make it snappy. This is from, yes, exactly. Let me just take that photo. No, this is just for the you guys made it happen. I just... Smile, though your heart is lonely. Wonderful, fantastic. Let's get a few more people in here now. Fatima Haram Asil, join them, please. Come join them. Let me see. Aha, David Luke over here. David Luke, one of the hardest working men in trade. Join us. The Minister of Trade, okay, please join us. We have the Honorable Minister here. Join us, sir. That would be very nice for you to join us as well. Let's get a few more of you in there. Where is the UNCTAD representative? UNCTAD, yes, the UNCTAD, please join us. UNCTAD, absolutely an essential partner in all this. Have I forgotten anybody? Afreximbank, Hippolyte Fofak. I love saying your name. Please join us as well. And the African Development, where is the African Development Bank? One of them is where? African Development Bank. Who is with the ADB? ADB, madam, join us. You're all big part of the family. Join us and let's take a few shots here. This is for the front page. Okay. Is there an ECOWAS representative here? Where? Oh, there you are. Okay. You need a wide-angled lens for this, definitely. Okay. All right. Is that possible? You're making my photographer sweat. Maybe come in, if you can possibly come in a little bit. Maybe people to stand at the front, perhaps. Yeah, that's an idea. Yeah, yes, wonderful. Yeah, some of you can stand here. Perfect, exactly. Oh, the lady standing in the front. Okay, that's okay. No, you're balancing it out. I like that. Fantastic. Okay. Okay, snap well. Remember, this is the one shot you have to get right, okay? Madam, with your phone, please. This man is the official photographer. Don't bonk him. Wonderful. Are we done? Are we done? Not yet? Okay. Are you done? No, he's not. This man is a professional. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the Africa Trade Forum 2018. You've been great. Now, I believe there's tea and coffee, if I'm not mistaken. Tea and coffee outside. Let's go and make some new friends.